Well, Penny Hardaway and the Memphis Tigers made a statement this past week in Maui after picking up wins against defending back-to-back champs UConn and then Tom Izzo and Michigan State. The Tigers are now ranked 16th in the AP poll. Memphis eventually fell to Auburn in the Maui Invitational final as the Tigers couldn't find an answer for the big man duo of Janai Broome and Dylan Cardwell, as Auburn rode the waves and handed Memphis its first loss of the season. But Avery, it's not all doom and gloom for Tigers fans. After the tournament, Penny Hardaway spoke positively about his team's future.
So I feel like we grew from this weekend, and we're only going to get better. This is a new team, 13 new players. To get to the championship, not knowing each other, not being in a battle before until this weekend, with the best teams in the country, I'm really proud of the effort and looking forward to getting back to practice after Thanksgiving.
Yep, so you see the Tigers sitting there at 16th. It's well-deserved. I really think it is. And if you look at some of those other teams around them who are having great seasons, a lot of undefeated teams, including a juggernaut that is Florida and Cincinnati, and then Baylor sitting there picking up losses against quad one teams. I think Memphis, deservedly so, sits 16th. And then you've got UConn, who essentially was broken after the tournament, sitting there at 25.
Tumbled out of the top 25. Yeah, we don't have the last 9 spots, but UConn is kind of just in there after being number 2 entering the Maui Invitational. I think what we saw from, first of all, I got to stay on this UConn point for a moment, because Dan Hurley came in there and was like,
Meltdown.
We will never play another multi-team tournament ever again. I was like, dude, your team fell apart. I don't know what.
Back-to-back national champion.
Right. Come on.
What are we doing?
Can't believe it. We'll only play home and homes from now on. Anyway, let's get back to Penny Hardaway and what Penny Hardaway and the Tigers did. You can't use a better word than just impressive. What they were able to do to come out there, especially with the way they got up on UConn, right? And then eventually lose the lead. You end up in an overtime scenario, take the lead back, finish the game against the back-to-back national championship. Our national championship champion, I think, was really impressive because it said a lot about just the maturity of where the Tigers are right now. This is a basketball team where a lot of these guys are seniors. They've been in wars before. They're not going to be daunted by the moment. I think they walked in there saying, no, we got something to prove. Yeah. And they did it, certainly in the UConn game. You come back, you more or less dominate Michigan State, who they made their own run, but the Michigan State win was not as impressive to me as the UConn win, but in terms of scoring margin, it certainly was. I like what they did in both of those games. And then you play Auburn, it's like they're the best team in the country.
Insanely good.
Best team in the country, and that's bar none. So there's nothing to hang your head about and that perspective. And we listen to some of these coaches talk about what Penny Hardaway has done with this squad, and he says they're tough. They play good defense, and they got shooters. And I think really maybe the shooters aspect was something that they maybe didn't have as much in the past, that they definitely have this year. But this is a team that certainly looks like a lot of what we saw last year, but maybe a little bit more chemistry in the mix.
Yeah, and after the tournament, they're still the best three-point shooting team in the country. And a lot of that is
which I am surprised by.
Yeah, which I am surprised by, too.
By.
PJ Haggerty and Tyrese Hunter are, and you look at PJ Carter as well, are a big reason for that. They've been shooting the lights out. Tyrese averaged 24 points per game in the Maui Invitational. He was insane. In that Michigan game, he went nuts, dude. It was crazy. And you really saw shades of David Jones from last year a little bit with that. He's a little bit of a different player. PJ as well, averaging 22 points per game for the season, which is better than pretty much everyone who was ranking the top guards in the nation. We're talking about Dylan Harper, R.J. Davis, Mark Sears out of Alabama, Caleb Love, DeJuan Harris, Wade Taylor IV. None of those guys are averaging 22 points per game, and P.J. Haggerty was on none of those lists. Well, we're talking about individuals, but like you said, what the coaches were saying, this is a team effort. These guys are playing well on both sides of the wall. They're playing together, and all of those coaches, Hurley, Izzo, Bruce Pearl, they all said Penny has something with this team, which is something different than what coaches were saying about Memphis last year. It would be, man, they really have something with Javon Quinterly. They really got something with David Jones, and it was kind of like the opposing coaches after losses were alluding to, maybe if the rest of those guys kind of get it together, this team can become what Penny wants. And last year, they just never got up to that defensive potential. I think already this team is exceeding Penny's expectations with their potential defensively. If you look at that Michigan State game, Avery, that was Michigan State's best three-point shooting game of the season. They couldn't get anything inside the paint. If they didn't have their best three-point shooting game of the season, it would have been an absolute blowout. They were hitting some crazy shots against Memphis, especially in the second half. And that Michigan State team is going to be a tournament team, I really think. If you look at their coach, Izzo, he's going to get them there.
He's going to get them there.
UConn, I truly believe that UConn just got rattled, and they never were able to recover. And they eventually go on and get blown out to finish last, right? Against
seven of eight.
Yeah, and they played UConn in that. They played Dayton in that final game and lost by 20-plus points. I do think UConn's going to get it back on track.
Yeah.
I think by the end of the year, that is going to look like a great win. I mean, right now it still is a quad one win. Memphis, the only team besides the only other team that has more bubble wins, teams that are kind of on the fringe of possibly, if the season ended today, making the tournament, is Auburn. Yeah. Memphis is the second team in the nation with bubble wins. They also have 5 wins against teams in the top 100 against KenPom, in the KenPom ratings, which is really impressive this early on. And now the Tigers still have a tough slate ahead. Having to play teams like Ole Miss is going to be tough. But right now, and it is what they do next. But right now, Penny is sitting there. He's not losing sleep at night now, Avery. Like, he feels good about the team.
And he shouldn't be. I mean, I think what we saw with this team in particular, and what we've seen Penny Hardaway do with schedules in the past, is you have to put together these daunting mammoth schedules, because you know what you're going to get in the AAC with. It's just a conference that's not great. And so if you drop 2-3 games like they did last year, you're talking about not getting into the tournament at all. And what we see with a schedule like they've got, when you get a win over UConn, and what I would have loved, or I'm sure what Penny would have loved, is like UConn, you beat UConn, and then UConn goes and wins the rest of the consolation bracket. They completely fall apart, which that's not Penny's fault. Well, maybe it is Penny's fault a little bit. He broke Dan early. But I think with his team is they have to win these level of games. I think it was almost like, outside of winning the tournament altogether, I think that was the best case scenario for Penny to go in there and get 2 wins and come out with 1 loss. And now you're looking up, and everybody's putting you in their top 15. I saw the Tigers as high as 11 in some people's polls. To be unranked coming into that tournament and coming out with the result that you did, I think says a ton. And now you've got a stretch of games coming up in FedEx Forum that's going to be really exciting for these Tigers. And I think it brings the hype back, right? And that's one of the things that you really need if you're a Penny Hardaway squad. You need other teams to come in there with the fear of God that they're coming into FedEx Forum, right? And you need this team to feel confident when they play in FedEx Forum against a few more of these teams who are going to be really good. I think it's going to be really important for this next stretch of games that Penny's got.
Yeah, and it's 2 guys who we haven't mentioned, Musa Cisse and Dane Danger, who are kind of rotating in and out in that center position.
Front court's been nice.
Yeah, the front court has been nice, and Penny's been playing them together as well, and that's been really good. In the UConn game, Musa almost came to blows with a UConn player, and you know who the first person was to have his back? Dane Danger. And those are 2 guys who were fighting each other over minutes. It kind of flipped where Dane would get 26 minutes against UConn, and then Musa would get 26 the next night against Michigan State, and then it flipped because Dane, more of the agile guy, guarding someone like Janai Broom. But for those guys to clearly like each other is so important. When we saw what happened with the team chemistry last year, and I asked a couple weeks ago, I asked Dane about their relationship. He said, yeah, we live right next to each other. We see each other all the time, so we hang out outside of practice and outside of games, and that's so important. And Petey believes that his front court could be the best defensive front court in the country. And right now, they look like they have the potential to do so. And if you look at someone like Jordan Brown from last year, who Penny was really relying on, and then all of a sudden he disappeared, tried to get a contract to China. What could have been if Jordan Brown was playing to this potential? Penny needs a big man. He really does. And it looks like he's found his big man in either Musa Cisse or Dane Danger, but it's something to pay attention to as we head into Wednesday nights. They play Louisiana Tech. Who's going to get the most minutes? We'll see. Either way, they're both going to be impactful.
Yeah, Wednesday night, Louisiana Tech in FedEx Forum once again.
FedEx Forum.
So the Tigers playing
well.
well.
Be proud.
As they should be, because they're playing so well.